I stood at the back of the ballroom, heart pounding so loud I swore it echoed louder than the jazz band. My fingers trembled as I clutched the folded note in my hand. Words I had rewritten a dozen times, then finally thrown away. I didn't need the paper. I knew exactly what I had to say. The lights dimmed slightly as the host tapped the mic. And now, before we end the evening, someone very special has requested to say a few words. Whispers spread across the crowd like wildfire. No one was scheduled after the CEO's glowing farewell speech, but the host pointed in my direction. "Come on up, young lady." I took a breath and stepped into the light. That's when I saw him. His smile froze in place, jaw slightly open. He blinked. Once? Twice? The champagne flute slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Everyone turned to stare at me. Some looked confused. Others, curious. A few, horrified. I stepped up to the mic. "My name," I began, voice steady, "is Alina. I am the daughter Richard Dawson never acknowledged. The daughter he told no one about. The one he abandoned 22 years ago." Gasps. Silence. Then chaos. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had waited my entire life for this moment. To no longer be invisible. To no longer be a secret. He tried to stand, tried to speak, but I raised my hand and said, "You've had 40 years of speeches, Dad. Tonight, it's my turn." Growing up, I didn't know I was a secret. I thought I was just unlucky. A father who died before I was born. A mother who worked 2 jobs, barely keeping a roof over our heads. We didn't talk about him, not because she was bitter, but because she looked genuinely afraid. Every birthday, I made a wish I never told anyone. I wish my dad would find me. He never did. Until one day, I found him. And what I discovered was worse than anything I could have imagined. I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment in a forgotten corner of Detroit, where the streetlights flickered like they were too tired to keep watch anymore. The wallpaper in our living room peeled at the corners, and the floorboards groaned like they remembered better times. Still, my mother, Maria, kept the space clean and smelling like lavender and fresh bread, trying to cover the struggle with warmth. From the outside, people called us quiet, modest, just the 2 of them. But from the inside, it felt like we were always missing a third shadow, some shape in the doorway that was supposed to be there. Mom never talked about my dad, never showed me pictures, just vague answers like, "He's not with us anymore," or "That part of my life is over." As a kid, I imagined he was dead. Later, I assumed he must have been a mistake she regretted. But there was something behind her eyes that didn't match regret. It was fear. When I turned 12, I asked again. This time I pushed harder. I remember standing in the kitchen while she stirred lentil soup, our end-of-the-month meal. Was he bad to you? I asked quietly. She didn't look up, just stirred slower. Not bad, just powerful. It was the only clue I got for years. My name is Alina. I'm 22 now. I study journalism at Michigan State. Or at least I did, before everything fell apart. I was always drawn to hidden stories. I liked peeling back the layers of people, digging beneath headlines. I didn't realize that one of the biggest stories I'd ever uncover would be my own. I worked 2 jobs to help pay tuition, waitressing at a diner and interning with the local news station. I didn't party much. I didn't date. There was always this weight I carried, like I didn't quite belong anywhere. I envied my friends with large, chaotic families and dramatic Sunday dinners. I didn't need a dozen cousins. I just wanted one person to say, "Hey, I've got your back." My mom tried. She really did. But she had secrets stitched into her smile. One afternoon, I came home early from work and found her sitting at the kitchen table, crying silently into an envelope. It looked old. Faded cream paper, edges yellowing. I only caught a glimpse before she shoved it under a stack of junk mail. But I saw the name on it, Richard Dawson, and below it, in elegant cursive, "For Maria." The name haunted me for days. Richard Dawson. I didn't recognize it, but something inside me sparked. I waited until she left for her evening shift at the hospital, then dug through the drawer. It wasn't just a letter. There were pictures, newspaper clippings, a wedding announcement. My stomach dropped. He was alive. More than that, he was famous. Richard Dawson, named Midwest Business Leader of the Year. Dawson Biotech announces landmark cancer research partnership. He was a CEO, a public speaker, a philanthropist, a man with a family. A different family. I stared at a photo of him in a tailored suit, standing next to a woman with pin-straight blonde hair and two teenage kids who looked like they walked off the pages of a lifestyle magazine. His daughter was around my age. Had another daughter, one who wasn't hidden. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to call Mom and demand the truth. But I also didn't. Because deep down, I knew. I always knew something was wrong with the version of my life I'd been given. When she came home, I didn't confront her. Not at first. I waited. I watched her carefully, noticing things I hadn't before. The way she always looked over her shoulder when walking home. How she flinched when she heard the word lawsuit on TV. The times she pulled out that same letter and just held it, like a wound that never closed. I started researching him, digging deeper. Every search led to more questions. He wasn't just successful. He was influential. He sat on boards, spoke at conferences. Was scheduled to retire in a few months with a gala event in Chicago. I found old court records. They were sealed, but one summary line stood out. Paternity claim dismissed. Under private settlement. I felt like I was going to be sick. So it was true. He knew about me. And he still walked away. The night I confronted Mom, it was raining. The kind of rain that feels angry. I stood by the kitchen counter, holding the envelope. Her face turned, pale when she saw it. "You lied to me," I said quietly. She sat down like her legs gave out. "I didn't lie. I protected you." "From what?" She shook her head. "From a man who saw you as a problem, not a person." She told me everything. They met when she was 26. She worked as a lab assistant. He was already climbing the ladder at Dawson Biotech. She thought it was love. He promised her everything until she got pregnant. He said it would ruin him, she whispered. That his family, his board, they'd never accept it. He begged me to get rid of you. I couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. When I said no, she continued, he offered money, a lot of it. Then lawyers showed up. They told me I'd never win in court, that I could sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear, or fight and lose everything. My mom was never weak. But that night, I saw how strong she had to be just to survive. She chose me over comfort, over money, over safety. I loved her more than I ever had. But I also felt something I couldn't suppress anymore. I wanted him to see me. Weeks passed, but the rage inside me didn't. I found myself imagining what I'd say to him. Sometimes I yelled it into my pillow. Sometimes I whispered it while walking to class. He was planning a retirement party, his farewell to the world he built. Black tie, invitation only, held at the Millennium Hotel in Chicago. I knew I had to go. I had no invitation, no connection. But I was his daughter, and I wasn't going to stay a secret anymore. Visually, the contrast between my world and his was staggering. I walked to class in secondhand coats while his daughter posted Instagram photos from a Paris runway show. Their mansion had columns and gates. Ours had a leaky roof and a broken mailbox. I became obsessed. I saved photos, watched interviews. I studied the way he spoke, his body language. I wanted to understand what kind of man could abandon a child so easily and still smile for cameras. The answer came in pieces, and none of them were pretty. A former employee, a woman named Elise, agreed to meet me after I reached out anonymously. Over coffee in a quiet bookstore cafe, she said something that stuck with me. He's charming in public, but behind the curtain, he's ice. Every move is calculated. She paused, then added, and he never likes loose ends. I was a loose end. I started documenting everything. Every photo, letter, record. I built a folder titled, Proof of Me. Not for revenge, not for money, just for the truth, and maybe a little for closure. When I bought a bus ticket to Chicago, I didn't know what I'd say. I only knew that I couldn't keep living in the shadows of someone else's choices. My mother begged me not to go. They'll crush you, she whispered. But I wasn't a child anymore. I had a voice, and I was going to use it, even if it shattered every illusion they ever built. The Millennium Hotel in downtown Chicago looked like a palace wrapped in gold. The kind of place where every doorman had a perfect smile and every chandelier cost more than our apartment's annual rent. As I stepped through the revolving doors, in a black thrifted cocktail dress and heels I could barely walk in, I felt like a ghost floating through someone else's life. I didn't have an invitation, but I had a plan. I watched the entrances for over an hour. Guests arrived in sleek cars, handed off their names at the reception table, and were ushered into the grand ballroom. Then I saw her, Emily Dawson, his youngest daughter. I recognized her from a dozen social media posts. She stepped out of a black SUV in a pale blue satin gown, holding a small clutch. I timed it perfectly. As she entered, I slipped into the crowd behind her, staying close enough to pass through the guest check-in without notice. A simple smile, head held high, and the confidence of someone who belonged. No one stopped me. Once inside, I was overwhelmed by the scent of cologne, champagne, and power. The ballroom shimmered under soft golden lights. A string quartet played. In the background, men in tuxedos shook hands like kings passing thrones. Women clinked glasses with diamond-laced fingers. I kept my back straight, eyes scanning the room. And then I saw him, Richard Dawson, my father. He was standing near the stage, surrounded by board members and old money donors. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, his black suit tailored to perfection. He laughed the kind of laugh that commands attention. His wife stood beside him, beaming, her arm looped through his like a prize. He looked untouchable. I stood frozen for a moment. I'd rehearsed this moment so many times in my head. But now that he was real, just 20 feet away, I felt my confidence splinter. That man is my father. I looked nothing like him. I looked like my mother. Brown eyes, warm-toned skin, thick, black curls. But when I narrowed my gaze, I saw the same sharp cheekbones, the same dimple in the left cheek when he smiled. I turned away before I broke down. I headed toward the restroom to regroup. That's when I heard it, two women standing near the hallway, whispering and laughing over the clink of their wine glasses. I still don't get how he pulled it off, one said. That girl from years ago, she could have ruined everything. My heart skipped. Oh, Maria, the other replied. Please. She signed the papers, took the hush money. I mean, she tried to keep the baby, but no one believed her. They laughed again, casually cruel. My chest tightened. I stepped into a nearby alcove and pressed my back to the wall, trembling. My mother had been threatened. They didn't just push her into silence, they erased her, erased me. This wasn't about an affair. This was a cover-up. I opened my phone, pulling up the folder I'd created. Photos, letters, paternity docs. even an old voicemail my mother had saved from one of his lawyers. I had proof. But what would I do with it? Then I saw the stage. A host was prepping note cards. A mic stood ready for the next round of speeches. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to scream in his face. I didn't need to send a dramatic email or file a legal motion. All I needed was 5 minutes on that stage. I waited until the final round of speeches was called. The room had begun to quiet. Champagne glasses refilled. Conversations shifted to polite murmurs. The host smiled brightly from the stage. And now, before we end the evening, we've received a special request from a young lady in the crowd. Someone who said she has a message of gratitude for Mr. Dawson's legacy. My cue. I walked down the center aisle, heart thundering like war drums. I climbed the steps one by one, the room tilting with every footfall. My father's eyes widened as he recognized me, not from memory, but from something deeper. A flicker of realization danced across his face. He knew exactly who I was. I reached the mic. My fingers grazed the cold metal. I looked out at the room. At the lies, the gold-dusted glamour, the smug faces of people who had no idea who I was or why I was there. And then I said, "My name is Alina." People tilted their heads. I know many of you don't recognize me, but one person in this room does. One person who's spent 22 years pretending I don't exist. All eyes turned to him. My father, Richard Dawson, was now pale as bone. His jaw twitched. I am the daughter he abandoned. The daughter he buried under legal settlements and lies. Tonight I am not a secret. I am not a mistake. I am his. Gasps erupted. Some people stood. A woman in the second row actually dropped her drink. My father tried to rise. His wife grabbed his arm. I saw the panic spread across his face like wildfire. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand and said, "You've had 40 years of speeches, Dad. Tonight, it's my turn." The moment I stepped off that stage, everything changed. There was no applause, just stunned silence, like the whole room had been sucker punched. I could feel 100 eyes boring into my back as I walked past the gold chairs and linen-draped tables. I expected someone to stop me, maybe security, maybe even him, but no one did. Not yet. Then I heard his voice for the first time in my life. "Alina." Wait. I froze. It was the first time he had ever said my name. I turned slowly to face him. Richard. Dawson stood a few feet away, pale and shaking, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. "Let's talk," he said, barely above a whisper. Outside. We stepped out onto the balcony, the Chicago skyline glowing behind him like a kingdom built on someone else's grief. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "Not for sure." "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "You paid for silence. That means you knew." He ran a hand over his face. "It was complicated. I had a family, a business. Your mother, she made her choice." "She didn't have a choice. You gave her a legal gun to the head." His expression changed. The mask cracked. "You have no idea what that time was like," he said, sharper now. The board would have crucified me. I could have lost everything. I stepped closer. "You already lost something. Me." That landed. He looked away. "I thought about finding you," he muttered. I did, but by then, it was too late. What was I supposed to do? Show up and say, "Hey, remember me? I'm the coward who vanished before you were born?" "You could have tried," I whispered. Silence. Finally, he said, "What do you want, Alina? Money? A trust fund? A name drop?" My jaw tightened. "I want my existence acknowledged," I said. "And I want the people who erased me to feel what it's like to be exposed." His face hardened again. "Then you better be prepared for war." The story exploded within 24 hours. Someone had filmed my speech. It hit social media like a bomb. Illegitimate daughter crashes CEO's retirement became the headline of every gossip column and corporate blog. Overnight, I became that girl, the EI. Comment sections were vicious. Half of them called me brave. The other half, a liar, a gold digger, a publicity stunt. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. The dean at my university asked me to take a leave of absence. The news station I interned with dropped me until things settle. But the worst part? He didn't say a word. No apology. No statement. Nothing. He returned to his mansion. His picture-perfect family circled the wagons. I wasn't a person to them. I was a problem to be managed. I reached out to his wife, Caroline. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to understand what kind of woman could help erase a child. She actually answered. "Alina," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "I knew about you. He told me when we got engaged." My blood ran cold. "So? You knew he had a daughter? And you were okay with hiding it?" She laughed softly. "Sweetheart, I was pregnant with our son. I wasn't about to let some charity case fling ruin that. That charity case fling is my mother. She should have known her place." The call ended before I could scream. That night, I punched a hole in the wall of my apartment. A week later, I received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter, folded inside a medical file. It was from a woman named Dr. Elaine Morris, one of the former heads of research at Dawson Biotech. The letter began, "Alina, if you're reading this, it means Richard never told you the full truth. I couldn't live with myself unless someone did. Your mother didn't just leave because of scandal. She left because she discovered something she wasn't supposed to." My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. It wasn't just about me. It was about illegal research, unauthorized trials, something my mother had accidentally uncovered in the lab when she worked for him. She confronted him. He silenced her with legal threats. And to ensure she never spoke again, he turned her pregnancy into a liability. He didn't abandon us just to protect his family. He abandoned us to cover up corporate crime. I tracked down Dr. Elaine. She lived in a quiet suburb in Illinois, under early retirement. She looked at me like I was a ghost. "I'm sorry I didn't come forward," she said. "Your mother begged me not to. She was scared." What did she find? Elaine poured herself tea with trembling hands. Back in 2002, Dawson Biotech was testing a gene therapy prototype, years ahead of regulation. Your mother discovered irregular entries. They were experimenting on undocumented patients, forging data. My stomach dropped. And she told him? She was pregnant. He told her to stay out of it. When she pushed, the threats started. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother had been trying to protect everyone, and they made her pay for it. I asked Elaine if she'd be willing to come forward. Her answer was chilling. "I would, but I won't live to see the trial." She was dying. Stage 4 cancer. Likely caused, she believed, by exposure to one of the very chemicals Dawson Biotech had developed. That night, I confronted my mom again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I cried. "Why did you let me think this was just about abandonment?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Because I didn't want you to carry my fear. I wanted you to grow up with hope, not hatred. I need you to speak up," I said. "We can go public. Together." She hesitated, then shook her head. "They'll destroy you," she whispered. "They'll do what they did to me. Only worse." "I don't care anymore," I said. "He stole everything from us. He doesn't get to walk away again." She pulled me into a hug, her shoulders trembling. "If you go after him," she said, "make sure you don't lose yourself." 2 days later, I received a formal invitation, delivered by courier. It was a request to meet with Richard Dawson's legal team. Against my better judgment, I went. His lawyer greeted me like I was an inconvenience, tall, stiff, emotionless. "We are prepared to offer a settlement," he said. $750,000. No more public comments, no more press, and you'll sign a final NDA. I laughed bitterly. "You really think you can pay me to disappear again?" The lawyer opened a folder. "We have access to your phone records, academic records, debt history. We can make things difficult for you." My fists clenched under the table. I leaned forward, voice low. "You think I'm afraid of losing everything? I never had anything because of him." I stood up. "Tell Richard he can keep his money. I'm coming for the truth." I went home and opened the old envelope my mother had first hidden, now with new eyes. Tucked inside the folds of the final page was something I'd missed before. A photo. Faded. Old. A sonogram. On the back. "Richard, this is our daughter. She deserves more." It had been sent to him, unopened, returned to sender. That was the day my mother stopped hoping. And the day I started. I thought exposing the truth would bring relief, that I'd feel powerful. But I felt empty. The headlines kept coming. Dawson heiress scandal deepens. Secret daughter uncovers decades-old biotech cover-up. Illegitimate and unapologetic. Everyone had an opinion, but no one knew me. I spent a week in my apartment, curtains drawn, phone on airplane mode. The walls felt closer every day, like they were leaning in, whispering all the things I'd tried not to hear. "You ruined everything. You'll always be unwanted. You weren't erased. You were never meant to be here." I didn't eat, didn't shower, just stared at the ceiling and listened to the hum of my mother's old voicemail on repeat. "Alina, if you're hearing this, and if I'm not around, please know that I fought for you, every day, even when it didn't look like it." I clutched my pillow tighter. Did she really fight? Or did she give up? I hated myself for thinking that. But it was true. She didn't tell me everything. She let me grow up thinking my father had just vanished like a storm that never came back. Not that he'd deliberately destroyed her, me, us. And now that I knew, what could I do? He still had everything. The house. The legacy. The power. And I had my name trending on Reddit under "Thou corporate bastard child." One night I sat on the floor with all the evidence. Letters, documents, the photo, the sonogram, spread out like the debris of a shipwreck. I picked up the sonogram. Again. My fingers traced the shape, a little blur in black and white. Me, before I ever had a voice. Before I had pain or a name. Just a heartbeat on a screen, a flicker of possibility. I remembered something from when I was 5, a school project. My family tree. I'd drawn a stick figure of Mom, then me, then a dotted line where Dad should have been. I colored it in with a crayon labeled Mystery Blue. When I brought it home, Mom smiled, but her eyes watered. "Everyone's tree looks different," she whispered, stroking my hair. I believed her. Until now. My breaking point wasn't loud. There was no screaming or slamming doors. It was quiet. It came when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My hair was tangled. My eyes had lost their light. My lips were dry and cracked from biting them in my sleep. I looked like a ghost again. "You wanted the truth," I thought. "Now you have it. What are you going to do with it?" The mirror stared back, blank and cruel. Tears came slowly, as if my body didn't want to give them up. Like I had to earn my breakdown, and then they poured, heavy, ugly. Years of it. The little girl who waited for a birthday card that never came. The teenager who said, "My dad's not in the picture," with a casual laugh that hurt every time. The young woman who walked into a ballroom full of strangers just to be seen. All of her, all of me collapsed at once. Somewhere between sobs, I whispered out loud, "Why didn't you want me?" It didn't matter that I knew the answer. He didn't want the mess, the truth, me. It still felt like I had been born into rejection, like my very existence was a glitch in someone else's perfect code. And for the first time in this entire fight, I wasn't angry. I was just broken. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want money. I didn't want applause or interviews or trending hashtags. I wanted to be whole, to be wanted. And that's when the smallest, most dangerous voice inside me whispered, "Maybe that's never going to happen." The next morning, I woke up on the floor. I hadn't moved. The sun was rising, warm golden light cutting through the blinds. It landed across the sonogram still clenched in my hand, and something shifted, something small, fragile, but real. I sat up, knees aching, throat dry, and I said something I hadn't said in years. I'm still here. Not because of him, not because of her, because of me. Because every time I was supposed to break, I cracked, but rebuilt. He didn't raise me, but he didn't destroy me either. I got up, took a shower, a long one. I brushed out my hair, put on clean clothes, made coffee. And as I looked out the window at the world below, I felt something return. Not peace, not clarity, but resolve. If he didn't want to give me a place in his world, I'd build my own. And if he tried to erase me again, I'd make sure the world never forgot I existed. The first time I felt my power come back, it wasn't loud. It was the sound of my heels clicking through a courthouse corridor. 12 days after I'd hit my lowest point, I filed a formal whistleblower report against Dawson Biotech with the Department of Justice. The front desk clerk raised an eyebrow when I slid the thick folder across to him. "Name?" he asked. "Alina R. Dawson," I said. I smiled when I said it, not because I owed that name anything, but because he had spent 2 decades pretending it didn't belong to me. Now it was going to be the reason his world unraveled. The ally, Sophia Reyes, didn't do it alone. Sophia Reyes was a veteran investigative journalist, blacklisted by most major outlets for getting too close to corporate fire. She found me after I leaked the first photo of the sonogram and the letter from Dr. Elaine Morris. To a few anonymous message boards, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. "I brought coffee," she said, holding out 2 steaming cups, "and a non-disclosure agreement that says I'll go to jail before I ever screw you over." I stared at her, stunned. Why would you help me? She sat down on my couch like we were old friends. "Because Richard Dawson once destroyed my source," she said. "And because the world needs to hear the kind of story that sets fire to a dynasty." I stared at her for a moment, weighing it. She didn't blink, so I handed her the file. The next few weeks were a blur of strategy, interviews, sealed court documents, and whispered meetings in cafes and parking lots. Sophia was relentless. She connected the dots that even I couldn't see. How Dawson Biotech had used shell companies to pay off families of trial victims. How the original trial data had been scrubbed from FDA archives. How one of the accidental deaths in 2002 had been the younger brother of a lab technician who'd filed a missing persons report. Every story had been buried. Every threat traced back to Dawson. "I hope you're ready," she told me one night staring at her laptop. "Because when this drops, it's not just a scandal. It's an implosion." "Let it burn," I said. But inside, I was trembling. One morning, I received an email from a burner account. Subject: "We need to talk, urgently. James." I hesitated, then opened it. "Alina, I'm your half-brother. I saw the video. I had no idea. Please, I want to meet." I I sat frozen, staring at the screen. James Dawson, the golden boy. Firstborn, CFO of the company, the one Richard paraded on. Magazine covers as his legacy. I thought about ignoring it, but something inside me said, meet him. See what he knows. We met at a private library in River North, neutral, quiet, surrounded by dusty law books. He was already sitting there when I arrived, hands folded, looking nothing like the polished businessman from the press releases. His tie was gone, his eyes tired. There were shadows beneath the Dawson confidence. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing awkwardly. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came to hear the lie." He didn't flinch. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "Not until I saw the speech. Dad never told me, not once." "And you believed it?" I asked. "That I was fake?" "I didn't want to," he said. "But when someone lies for long enough, it starts to feel like the truth." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this in one of his desk drawers, hidden under old tax files. It was a photo. Me 7 years old, standing outside my school, my mother beside me. Taken from a distance. "I think he had someone watching you," James said softly. "I think he always knew." That photo broke something in me, but not in the way I expected. I didn't cry. I burned. He'd been watching us, watching me, all those years, pretending I didn't exist. He had me on file. It wasn't just cowardice. It was control. He knew exactly what he'd left behind. He just wanted to make sure we stayed in the dark, small, out of reach. I looked at James. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to fix it," he said. "I know I can't undo what he did, but I can help you finish it." He leaned forward. "There's a board meeting next week. Our shareholders are on edge. If there's ever going to be a reckoning, it's there." My mind clicked into motion. "And what if I show up?" His eyes didn't waver. "Then I won't stop you." Sophia and I spent the next 6 days preparing. We cross-referenced legal filings, compiled whistleblower testimony, scanned thousands of pages, and then we built a digital Dropbox. Every document, every letter, every scanned photo, all time-stamped, verified, encrypted. Then we crafted a single email from alina.rdawson@protonmail.com to all board members, Dawson Biotech. Subject: the daughter you hid, the evidence you buried. Attached: the truth. I scheduled it to send the morning of the shareholders' meeting. Then I picked out the one dress my mother had kept from her time at the company, a navy blue sheath, barely worn, still smelling faintly of old perfume and defiance. "I'll walk in like I belong there," I told Sophia. She grinned. "Because you do." The night before the meeting, I sat alone on the roof of my building. Chicago's skyline stretched around me like a fortress of glass and light. I held the sonogram in one hand, the folded photo in the other. This is it, I thought. Not revenge. Not retribution. Just acknowledgement. That I lived, that I mattered, that I was real. The Dawson Biotech conference room was a glass-encased monument to ego, 50 stories above downtown Chicago, with a view that made the city look like it belonged to them. Dozens of shareholders, executives, and media figures packed the space. Everyone was buzzing about Richard Dawson's farewell address. I stood near the back, anonymous in the crowd, until the moment came. The doors opened, and Richard walked in, flanked by executives. He was beaming, polished suit, proud eyes, decades of deception tucked neatly behind his grin. A murmur rippled through the room. He reached the podium. "Today marks not the end of an era," he began, "but the start of a legacy, a future built on truth, science, and integrity." I almost laughed out loud. Integrity. Right. I reached into my purse and gripped the folded speech in my hand. Not his. Mine. He finished with a slow, rehearsed pause. The room erupted in applause. Then the MC stepped up to the mic. Before we close, one more tribute. An unexpected guest has asked to say a few words to honor Mr. Dawson's remarkable career. He looked at Richard, who frowned slightly. We believe it's someone from your past, Richard. The mic was handed to me. I stepped onto the stage. The applause faded fast. Richard's eyes narrowed as I walked up. Recognition struck like a whip. His face changed. He looked afraid. Who are you? He asked, voice low, teeth clenched. I didn't look at him. I faced the room, cleared my throat, and said, Good evening. My name is Alina Rose Dawson. The silence hit like a wave. I was born 22 years ago, in a hospital not far from here. My mother's name was Dr. Elaine Morris. She worked under Richard Dawson for 8 years. I scanned the faces in front of me, blank, confused, a few intrigued. I'm his daughter. Gasps, whispers. I turned to him slowly. I know you hoped this day would never come, that you could retire with your hands clean, your story tidy, and your lies buried. I held up the sonogram. This is the first image you ever had of me. Then, the photo. And this is proof you knew I existed. For years, you paid people to watch us, to make sure we stayed out of the picture. And now, I reached into my folder. I've brought the picture to you. Richard stepped forward, grabbing the mic. This is absurd, he growled. I don't know this woman. Security, no, I said sharply. Don't embarrass yourself further. The board received an email this morning with full documentation, court-sealed files, payment records, testimonies. I looked out at the board members. Some were already checking their phones. One man looked pale. Your legacy isn't science, I continued. It's silence. You erased people. You ruined careers. You forced my mother out while she was pregnant. And when she died, you didn't send flowers. You sent lawyers. More murmurs. Sweat gathered on his forehead now. This is slander. It's truth, I snapped. And if you'd like to deny it, I'm sure the Department of Justice would love to hear your version. Sophia stood at the back of the room now, holding up her press badge. Smile, Richard. You're going live in 3, 2... The power shifted in an instant. He reached for the mic again, but his hand trembled. Alina, he said, voice cracking. This isn't the place. No, I said, locking eyes with him. This is exactly the place. I turned back to the room. For 22 years, I lived thinking my father was a ghost. And when I finally found him, he was worse than that. He was real, and powerful, and cowardly. I could feel the anger rising. Not chaotic, not out of control, just earned. You don't get to write the ending. Not anymore. I stepped back and dropped the mic gently onto the podium. And then I walked off stage. Wait, he hissed, catching up to me in the hallway behind the room. You think you've won? I can have you buried in lawsuits, defamation, libel. I turned slowly. Do it. Let's take this to court. Let's have DNA tests, depositions, testimonies from the women you paid off. Let's make it official. He paused, then looked away. For the first time, he had no script. You don't understand, he muttered. That company is my life. Everything. I built. You didn't build it alone, I snapped. You built it on people like my mother, and when she needed you, you erased her. Silence. I stepped closer. You don't have to admit it to them. But you owe me one thing. Just say it. Right here. He looked at me, eyes like mine but colder. I was young. It was complicated. I didn't plan for. Say it, I said. He took a breath. I'm sorry. Flat. Hollow. But it was something. Not good enough, I replied, and walked away. The fallout was instant. The story broke wide within hours. Sophia's exposé aired that night. CNN picked it up by morning. Stock dropped 17% in 2 days. Board members resigned. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Richard canceled all interviews. 3 weeks later, he withdrew from the retirement tour and issued a vague statement about focusing on personal matters. But the world had already moved on. And I was free. Not just from him, but from the shadow of needing him. I sat on my mom's old porch one evening, sipping tea, phone buzzing with texts I didn't bother answering. James had called twice. He'd resigned too, said he wanted to start something better, cleaner. Maybe we'd talk, maybe not. But I wasn't angry with him. He chose the truth. When it mattered, I looked at the sky. Quiet, calm, pink streaks of dusk folding over the horizon, and I finally whispered, "We did it, Mom." I don't know if she heard me, but I felt lighter, whole. I didn't need his name anymore, because I'd made one for myself. It's been 6 months, and still, sometimes, I wake up expecting the weight to be there, that old heaviness in my chest, the one that came from not knowing who I was, or worse, thinking I wasn't allowed to know. But it's gone now. Not because I found answers, but because I stopped begging for permission to exist. I moved back to her house in Evanston, not permanently, just long enough to breathe, to walk her garden barefoot in the mornings and feel the earth she loved. The rose bush she planted the spring I turned 6 still blooms. Fiercely. I dug through her boxes and found more letters, notes she never sent, photos she'd hidden away. She wrote about the betrayal, about the fear. But she also wrote this line, which I keep taped above my desk now. "Even if he never claims her, I hope she grows so tall the world can't miss her." I read it every morning, and I smile. Because I did. James emailed me again last month. Subject, "I'm not asking for family, just honesty." So we met. Just once. He's living in Seattle now. Says he's working on biotech projects that actually help people. He apologized, genuinely this time. And I believed him. "I don't know what kind of brother I can be to you," he said, eyes uncertain. "You don't have to be anything," I replied. "We start where we start. We talk sometimes. Now, not often, but it's something, a choice, not an obligation." Sophia's exposé won a Peabody. She invited me on stage when she accepted the award, but I stayed in the audience. I didn't need a spotlight. I had mine. That day on the podium was more than enough, but I'm proud of her, proud of us. She gave me a voice when I'd forgotten I had one. And when the applause rang out that night for her story, I knew. It wasn't his story anymore. It was ours. As for him, he vanished. No interviews, no press conferences. No memoir deal. Some say he moved to the coast. Others say he's battling lawsuits in private. I don't know, and I don't care. Let him live in the silence he once forced on us. Let him taste the emptiness of legacy when it's built on lies. Went back to school. I'm working toward my degree in public health, not to follow his footsteps, but to rewrite what legacy means. I volunteer at a legal clinic helping young women navigate paternity and workplace discrimination cases. Because no, one should have to fight alone the way my mother did. And no one should be erased because a man in power says so. Some days are still hard. Healing isn't linear, but I'm not walking through shadows anymore. I'm walking forward. If I could go back and talk to the girl I was, curled up on her twin bed, wondering why her father never wrote, never called, I'd tell her this. You were never the secret. He was. You were always whole, even when they tried to break you in pieces. And if you're watching this now, maybe crying, maybe angry, maybe remembering, the ache of being dismissed, I want to say this. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to take up space. You don't need anyone's last name to write your first chapter. Don't wait for the world to give you a mic. Take it. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been hidden, silenced, or made to feel like your story didn't matter? Tell me below. Let's talk in the comments. Because someone else out there needs to hear what you survived. Drop your thoughts. Like if you felt this. Subscribe for more stories that speak the truth others try to bury. And remember, your story doesn't need permission to be powerful. It just needs you.